Hello, everyone. This is Scott Miller with RampedUp. We appreciate you joining our webinar today, Alternatives for ZoomInfo and Data.com Customers. We have some people still trying to get into the webinar right now, and we'll give them just a couple of minutes before we get started. Thank you. All right, got a couple more people getting in here. Certainly appreciate everybody joining us here at 1 o'clock Eastern Daylight Savings Time, talking to you from Atlanta, Georgia. So it's in the afternoon here. So without further ado, why don't we get started? So a little bit about me. I'm Scott Miller. I'm the founder of RampedUp, co-founder of a company called Synthio, formerly Social 123, and an American Association of Inside Sales Professional Atlanta board member. To share a little bit about my history, I certainly have been in this space for a while, and understand, really the reason why I wanted to put this webinar on to begin with, because Data.com and ZoomInfo have really been giants of our industry for a long time. And when you think about the impact that these two giants will have in the vacuum they'll create, that really is self-serving as perhaps a competitor to these companies, but just as an observer of this space, wanted to share some of my comments on that as well. Just some housekeeping issues. As I'm sure most of you guys are aware, in the upper right-hand corner of the GoToWebinar information box, you're allowed to communicate to me, ask me questions if anything comes up during the webinar that you would like to discuss, or some questions, and we'll try to get to those when I see them. If not, we'll wait till the end, and if it's either not pertinent or germane, or I don't have a chance to get to them, then we will certainly follow up at the end of this. And of course, if you're viewing this from a recording, you're welcome to email me at contact@RampedUp.io if you have a question that you didn't get answered during this webinar. So we appreciate that. And so without further ado, again, let's get started. Tell you a little bit about the impetus for this agenda today. We're gonna talk about the ever-changing world of sales intelligence, and what the impact has on people that are in this space, and people that depend on contact data. In particular, Data.com, a great company. Jigsaw, a great company. Big fan of that company when it came out. ZoomInfo, Discover.org, two worlds colliding, and then alternatives for B2B direct dial contact data. So this will not certainly be a self-serving webinar. We certainly want to take a look at this from an observer of the space, and just give some thoughts and insights into that. So let's get into this in terms of sales intelligence, right? So most people understand, one of the stalwarts in our industry is called Dun & Bradstreet, and ever since Dun & Bradstreet merged in 1933, the R.G. Dun and the Bradstreet organization formed Dun & Bradstreet. It's really been a whirlwind for the sales intelligence space. This is a graphic, an infographic that was sent out from our friends over at Lead Genius, right? So I didn't create this, but I'm certainly borrowing it to show a little bit about the consolidation in the space, and how interesting all this stuff is. So take a look at those red X's: acquired or no longer in business, ZoomInfo, Data.com. You see One Source here, Net Prospects, Hoovers. Those are companies that were purchased by Dun & Bradstreet. And you look at Oceanos, purchased by, I believe, TechTarget. DataFox, First Range. So as the industry starts to consolidate and more technology becomes available, we just have to stay on top of our game to ensure that we know exactly what's going on, in the space. But in particular, since this is a webinar geared directly for Data.com and ZoomInfo customers, let's talk a little bit about, Data.com, right? And really what a glorious history, I consider it glorious, because I remember when I was a frontline salesperson, when I first got my hands on Jigsaw, I thought it was the best idea that I'd ever seen, right? I can share some of my information and get that information returned, or new information returned to me for prospect data, right? And so, that was the concept of Jigsaw. It was really the first of its kind. And Salesforce saw that and they purchased that, and that's where, you saw, the Data.com turned into Jigsaw, right? And so the way that it was handled was pretty interesting, right? I mean, it wasn't necessarily sold, as the Jigsaw folks had it before. There was the credit exchange program, but it was really added on, to Salesforce customers as part of their subscription license. And so, that was, somebody that competed against Data.com for a while. It was, difficult to try to understand, that pricing model. But then eventually, the crowdsourcing model began to fail, right? And, this is one of my favorite quotes from, one of my favorite people, Winston Churchill. Democracy is the worst form of government, save all others. So what does that mean, right? So Data.com really was something that we consider to be data democracy, where the four people would sit around a table and say, well, I think this person works here, I think this person works here, and we'll do the algorithms to say, well, the best chance that that people that don't know where that person works or does work, they'll take a vote, and based on their confidence rating, they'll say this person works there, right? Well, eventually, that was okay, save all others, but other sources came along, in particular, companies like LinkedIn, right? And so if you really want to figure out where somebody works, then you just had to look them up on LinkedIn, right? You didn't have to worry about a crowdsourcing model. So that really was one of the things that put, I think, Data.com out of the mainstream. There's other things that put it out of the mainstream as well, and that's, things such as the GDPR. And for those of you guys that are relatively new to this concept, the CCPA, right, which is the GDPR equivalent to data protection inside of California Citizens Protection Act. And this is coming down the pipe as well, right? It's not as onerous as the GDPR, but interestingly enough, when the GDPR took effect, that was May the 4th of last year, and that's when the Salesforce.com quit selling the Data.com Connect feature, and then it will be at the end of May 4th, 2019, that you can't get Data.com at all, right? So Data.com will go away, and these are some of the reasons why, right? The General Data Protection Regulation, and then the CCPA, which is, again, having the permission to collect this information and distribute this information on behalf of the customers, and then the opt-in requirements that come with marketing to these people. So Data.com going away, ZoomInfo purchased by Discover.org, and really, for what's interesting to watch about Discover.org and the guys over there, who I consider to be friends, how they've taken this company to, really was a muddling little company like the rest of our little companies a couple of years ago, and then, just continued to build and build and build and grow. And Henry's done a great job of building that database over there. And then with the acquisition of ZoomInfo, which was a real coup, right? And, one of the things that, we're proud of the guys over at ZoomInfo as well. One of the things that was, perhaps the most interesting about, this purchase is that, for a while, a lot of people only think there are two places that you can get this direct dial contact data, right? And so if you think about, the acquisition history, what that looks like, for Discover.org, and this is, going to give credit to Michael Levy over at GZ Consulting. If you guys have, if you don't follow his newsletter, I certainly recommend that you do. Discover.org has been on a fantastic growth path. And ZoomInfo isn't even the most recent company that they've purchased. Right? They've just purchased NeverBounce, which is an email validation solution that just, which is a great email validation solution. They have some intelligence around catch-all email addresses, that really has been confounding a lot of people that are in this space for a while. But take a look, just to kind of give you guys a concept of what DiscoverOrg has been doing. iProfile, wasn't really familiar with that acquisition as much as I was about Ranking. Ranking was an IT, contact shop, as DiscoverOrg started out as an IT contact shop. So that seemed to be a pretty good acquisition in 2017. ZoomInfo, more of a generalist. DiscoverOrg's trying to become more of a generalist, get away from, just the Fortune 2000. And then, NeverBounce as well, which is a great email validation tool. Now, ZoomInfo purchased DataNize. If you guys don't know who DataNize is, that was a Mark Cuban-backed technographic company. They did a really good job of analyzing what was on your website and, getting that intelligence to the user so that you can make competitive or complementary, campaigns using that information. So that's been DiscoverOrg, right? So ZoomInfo going away, Data.com, going away. What all does this mean, for, us as consumers, us for the rest of us? Well, a couple of things that I think that we need to take a look at in terms of, how this will impact everybody is, one of the ways that ZoomInfo, has, and now this is the DiscoverOrg idea as well, acquires their data, right? So, there's a utility that's called the ZoomInfo Community or the ZoomInfo Grow utility. And if you're not familiar with this, right, this is taken directly from ZoomInfo's terms and conditions. It's a tool that usually salespeople will put on their machines, either Gmail or Outlook, and it will allow the user will allow ZoomInfo to scrape their email signatures, out of that machine, so that they can, get the direct dial information, get the updates of the system, right? And so it's a pretty ingenious concept. I think one of the things, though, that now that ZoomInfo and DiscoverOrg will be one, that will be a main acquisition vehicle, is that there's a lot of scrutiny, especially someone that, that deals a lot with information security and data privacy. There's going to be a lot of scrutiny on that methodology. In essence, if you think what's going on is that these salespeople that are putting this utility on their machine are, in essence, giving their customer data, the company's customer data, to ZoomInfo in exchange, kind of like the Data.com model, in exchange for credit so they can use the ZoomInfo utility. Now, none of that goes past rarely does that go past it, let me say, the information security guidelines. And, if the leadership were really understanding what was happening about, getting their data out, or their customer data out, to be sold to general production and literally could be sold to their competitors, I'm sure that's information that, they wouldn't want to do. So look for that. There'll be a lot of scrutiny when it comes to, the acquisition model. And then, another thing I think that, we're going to see is, information regarding, a counterweight, for the pressure on pricing. So if you think about, what I said to begin with, there are, at a point in time, if you're going out and buying contact data and you're looking just for, you're not going to a boutique shop to try to, create a list or generate a list or procure a list on your behalf. Really what you're doing is that you're looking at ZoomInfo for contact data with direct dials, or you're looking for DiscoverOrg for contact data direct dials. And the great thing about competition, it keeps everybody honest, and hopefully it protects the consumer, right? So it would be a counterweight for pricing pressure. So one of the things that a lot of people that I've talked to since this has happened over the last month, they're worried about what that looks like, right? If there's only one there's only one player in this space that has access to direct dial contact data, then you are then they can set the price. And so we have to, that was good about DiscoverOrg and ZoomInfo. They could be a counterweight to one another, but now we don't necessarily know what's going to happen with that. So you could certainly expect the DiscoverOrg pricing model to go up. There's another aspect about, sort of the Noah's Ark effect, right? Where there's two of everything. And so right now, if you were to buy ZoomInfo, you could get DiscoverOrg, get ZoomInfo. Eventually that will go away. if you're buying from ZoomInfo, what does that look like in terms of, your support model? As I showed before, as DiscoverOrg has been purchasing companies, generally they just, roll the business into DiscoverOrg and into the organization over in Oregon. And like, for example, RainKing, there are not too many of those people that are still around, right? So right now, two of everything, a little confusing, but then, moved over to DiscoverOrg. So, counterweight for pressure, right? So what does this mean for us, right? What are the alternatives that are out there? So, this is the G2 crowd grid for sales intelligence. And, needless to say, right, that there are plenty of options and plenty of alternatives for what you're looking for. There are contact data alternatives, there are company data alternatives, or technographic alternatives, right? And all you have to do is go to G2 Crowd Best Sales Intelligence to take a look and see, really what's available, for you that is out there. But I would, hazard to say is that, one of the reasons why, we saw that DiscoverOrg and ZoomInfo, gained the popularity that they did is because they had one component that nobody else had, right? And that was, direct dial data, right? And so if you look here, kind of according to Funnel Clarity, consulting firm, it takes the seller 40% less dials to set an appointment by dialing directly. And so just, that, of course, that's probably intuitive, but just kind of put yourself in terms of what that means for return on investment, right? So if I have a BDR team, business development team, inside sales team, a sales development team, whatever you want to call that, even a call center, and I am, running my campaigns, whether it's through, a company like SalesView, SalesLoft, or Outreach, or VidReach, for that matter, you're trying to get your sales development campaigns out in front of your customers. There is a multi-touch aspect to it. One of the things that is interesting in this space that I've seen in the last, perhaps 3 to 4 years is how ineffective, mass emailing has become, and how more effective, tailored, hyper-tailored content has become, and picking up the phone and calling somebody, right? It used to be that email was a lot more effective than calling. Now calling is a lot more effective than email. And so that's what, the Funnel Clarity excerpt here is saying, is that, if you pick up the phone and you dial someone, you dial them directly, right? You don't have to navigate the phone tree, that's going to save you about 35 seconds even just per dial. You don't have to, worry about trying to get past the gatekeeper, right? And then you actually have the ability to get the individual on the phone, especially if you're calling on the opportune times. That, coupled with the fact that it makes your job a lot, as a salesperson, it makes or a BDR makes your job a lot more interesting, a lot more fun, and so you have better work-life balance, better quality of life, and better retention, with that level of data. Not to mention more effective. Secondly, right, if people would look to particularly DiscoverOrg, maybe not ZoomInfo as much, but DiscoverOrg, for a human validated aspect of it, right? So there's a lot of different ways that you can quote unquote validate data. It all really gets, turned under this concept of machine validation, right? So if you think about what machine validation is that, do I have a piece of software that can either, bump my record up against a LinkedIn profile or social profile to see if that person's there, right? That's a machine validation. Or can I do email validation, right? That's sort of a roundabout way of doing the same thing. Can I bump my email address where my email servers are talking to the recipient's email servers to see if that's accurate or not, right? Well, that's what you see here from HubSpot, that B2B data expires at a 3% rate per month. So therefore, if I'm, bumping that information up against LinkedIn, then I can kind of stay up, from a machine perspective, I can stay up to speed with that. And then email validation, right? If I'm just running those email addresses that I'm sending out, I'm validating before purchase, then, that's a good way to do it. Now, those are effective means, right? That it beats not doing that for sure, right? You certainly want to machine validate, but there are two big gaps, with using this methodology on its own, right? The first gap is that if you're relying on a social profile in particular to validate your record, then the only information that you're going to have a lot of confidence in is going to be the data where someone left on their own volition. Go ahead and just do a little test or think about when, this for your on your own, is that if you were either, let go or fired or left, otherwise not on your own terms, do you go out and change that information on LinkedIn, right? And the answer to that question is absolutely you don't, right? You want to look employed while you're searching for a job until you get your new job, right? So, that's a pretty big gap, right? So you certainly can't rely specifically on that, we live in a very transient society, right? So you certainly don't want to rely on social, altogether. And then this email validation piece, right? So there's a concept of an accept all email server. And so what that email server really is a higher security server. So it is sort of like a gate before the SMTP negotiation or handshake will happen, meaning that, it will check to see if this is a nefarious email, if it's a blast email. It'll check your sender score. So for many reasons, and it doesn't have to return a bounce. So imagine the concept of a submarine using sonar navigating the deep, dark waters of the ocean. And of course, it pulls out a ping and it comes back and it knows where to go, right? That's a binary thing, yes, no, right? And so some email addresses some emails do that. However, most of them, especially the bigger companies, they're going more to this accept all, this higher email server, because they don't want to get attacked through their email server. So if you're using email validation alone, that's 50%. So the one thing that you can do to help add an extra layer of credibility, to your contact data is human validation. And so we certainly ask that, that is important, especially if you're looking at data from a SDR, BDR perspective, where a direct dial phone number is important to the success of the campaign, and the accuracy of that contact record, meaning that a human being has picked up the phone and validated that person is there, is also important, right? Because you could lose anywhere from 20 to 50% of your entire list integrity, on a BDR campaign if you're not getting that information. Okay. So, that's what we do. That's who RampedUp is, and that's how we work. Again, there are many solutions that are out there. One of the reasons why we think that we're a good solution for Data.com and a good solution for ZoomInfo is that, we do provide, a user interface that Data.com users would be interested in and familiar with, and results in a CSV format that they are familiar with or work inside of Data.com. In terms of ZoomInfo, if that's you don't want to go to Discover.org, you might have made your decision last time when you did your due diligence and you decided that you want to go a different direction, or you chose ZoomInfo for a reason. We do have a direct dial component, inside of our data, except we take it one step further, meaning that we have, human validated data. So we are an alternative. There are other alternatives that are out there, for customers. So in closing, we do have a couple of questions, and one is about some of the user interface that we have in the system. Let's see here. Here's a good question. All right. So as we close, this is some information about the system, and we'll keep that set up for you and share with you. So, all right. So here's the first question. So Data.com credit exchange program. What does RampedUp do for that? So we do have a credit exchange program. In some instances, you want to follow up to this email to see if you qualify for the credit exchange program. And so what the credit exchange program basically is that we don't take data, we don't swap data. That's the crowdsource model that Data.com has. What we do is that we don't want Data.com customers to be left out in the cold, by the system going away. And so, that we will, in some instances, if you qualify, and so we need to make sure that you do, we will allow you to use those Data.com credits, inside of our RampedUp instance. So, contact us for this, contact at RampedUp.io for that. All right, what is this next question that we have here? How often do we validate contact data? So we validate the contact data. It's every 90 days, and it's not the entire database. So we have about 100 million contact records that we keep under management. But the ones that we do validate, the top 4 or 5 million of those records, it's because those are the ones that are the most searched and the ones that are most downloaded. And since we know that information, who those people are, we try to stay on top of it and get sure that's the most validated decision makers. Okay. Next piece is how often do we do this validation? So we try to touch base to these guys every 90 days. All right. I think that's the last one. So again, we appreciate this. Spending a couple of minutes with us here on Wednesday afternoon, and if you're listening to this as a recording, we certainly appreciate your time, energy, and effort. And so, as a thank you for watching this, you're entitled to a 2-week free trial of our system. So maybe we can help you out as a Zoom alternative. We have an interesting pricing structure. It's a lot different than what you might be familiar with in terms of what other folks are out there just on a per credit basis. So you buy by the drink, and take a look at it. Another piece that we have that is unique to us is a sales enablement component on top of a sales intelligence component, and we'd love to share that with you as well. And so you're entitled to that. All right, so we have a couple more questions. So as we close here, do we provide direct dial phone and emails? So yes, Floyd, we do provide direct dial phone, and we do provide emails and validated email addresses. So that's one of the reasons why we think that we'd be a good alternative for ZoomInfo. Jim asked about, what are some of the sources that we use? Yeah, the sources are, we do have a web source component about it. We do have some partners that can get information from business cards. So if you think about, the ability to scan a business card and to get that information from a scanned business card into, a data asset. We do partner with the largest business card scanning company that's on Google and on the Apple Store. And, to date, they've had 4 billion with a B, 4 billion, inputs into their business card scanner. So part of the throughput is that it gets to, you get to purpose that information. And it is really a game changer in terms of getting those direct dials and getting those cell phone numbers into the system. So Jim, we certainly appreciate that. Okay, in closing, we, again, you're registered for, or you are able to get a free trial, 2 free trial of the system. So we'll send some information out. Of course, you're welcome to contact us at RampedUp.io. So thank you all very much. We appreciate your time, and we will see you on the next one. Bye.